What's going on, guys? Rich Schnyderite here, publisher of Nittany Nation, joined by NFL draft expert Ryan Roberts. Ryan, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Not much. I know we had the chance to obviously talk ball a couple of months ago, so I appreciate you having me back on.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I mean, like I just said, one of the best when it comes to NFL draft stuff. So let's jump right into this thing. Penn State's got a ton of dudes this year that are probably going to enter the draft after the season. Let's start off with the big name, maybe the best wide receiver in the country. Maybe it's a strong opinion, I guess, a little bit. But Jahan Dotson, what can you tell me about him?
Yeah, I mean, right now, Dotson, I would say, is probably one of the guys that you could pencil in as, one of the Bolitnikoff favorites at this point. A guy that's obviously had a great season. I kind of had mixed feelings about him, to be honest, going back to the summer, because I didn't see a ton of separation on film, and I was curious if that was more his shortcomings versus just quarterback play for Penn State. And I do think it's a little more shortcomings, to be honest, because he has had dynamic season. He doesn't have the biggest size, so he's right around 5'10", 180 pounds. So he's going to be somewhat limited to where he can align from a alignment perspective. But I do think when we're talking about a guy that works mostly out of the slot, maybe some Z outside, I don't think he's a true X guy, but I think that he has alignment versatility. He's very quick after the catch, has some yak ability, and I think there's a little bit more nuance than I gave him credit for in his route running ability. So I think when we're talking day two prospect, I think that it's firmly in the conversation. I know some guys, when you're talking about the Mel Kipers of the world, have him as their top ranked wide receiver, and I think maybe even a top 10 player. I'm not quite there, but I think late first, possibly, but I'm more on the second round train. But I do think that he is a rock solid secondary option at the next level as a wide receiver.
So I know, talking to like a couple people and reading mock drafts and comparisons, who would you kind of compare him to, and I guess kind of why?
Comparison, it's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a boring one, but like stylistically, he does remind me of Deshaun Hamilton that used to be at Penn State. Now, I do think he's a much better prospect than Deshaun, but for me, he's not a guy that I would say, like, maybe an Emmanuel Sanders might be a guy that pops into the mind a little bit. Like, I don't think that he is so much that you can kind of pencil in and say, like, he is without a doubt your dynamic deep threat type of wide receiver. And I don't think that he's a guy that obviously has a bunch of size, but I think when you're talking about a guy that just does everything really well and is a very good route runner and has hands, I think that there's a lot of good things about him. So I think more rock solid all around game than maybe excelling in one area, similar to how Emmanuel Sanders has obviously had a great career doing all of that. He does kind of the little things that maybe sometimes don't even get brought up on the stat sheet, but he just is an invaluable wide receiver at the NFL level.
All right, so sticking with the offense, Rasheed Walker, one of the better offensive linemen in I guess this year's draft overall. New Jersey native, Hun School guy. I saw him in high school. I haven't seen much of him until recently since covering Penn State, but he's looked really good and he's developed pretty well.
Yeah, no, and he's a guy. I mean, I always love talking New Jersey guys, being a New Jersey guy myself. I would say Rasheed, from a physical perspective, you're always going to hear me talk about the unteachables. You can't teach 6'6", 320, and with good length and good athleticism. Like, he has all the baselines to being a starting caliber offensive tackle in the next level. He's another guy in the summer I think was maybe hyped up just a slight bit, a hair too high. I don't think that he's a first round caliber player. I think similarly he's a day two prospect, but I think that he is a guy that could develop into a starting offensive lineman. I think although he's played left tackle, he's probably more of a right tackle, because I think that he has good movement skills, but I don't think it's anything special. I don't think he's necessarily an ideal blindside protector. And I think that there's some technical issues in there with some of his sets. He kind of oversets at times, lets up some inside rushes, but I think that he kind of compares a little bit to Jawan James, who's been a starting right tackle in the NFL for a long time and been a good one, with the Miami Dolphins. Now I know it's been, he was with the Denver Broncos and that kind of didn't end the way he wanted, but we're talking about a starting caliber right tackle for a long time. For me, that's what I see when I see Rasheed Walker.
So now switching to the other side of the ball, I'm not even going to pretend I know how to pronounce his name. I call him Arnold. Arnold, how'd you say it before? Ebiketie?
I think it's Ebiketie.
Ebiketie. All right. Yeah. There we go. Well, I know you've seen quite a bit of film from him in his Temple days, right?
Yeah, he's a guy that, like, I was excited about when he was at Temple, because you always saw the flashes of nice stuff. He's kind of a little bit of an undersized stand-up rusher, but then he goes to Penn State, and honestly, this year he looks like a completely different player. He has taken his game to a whole other level. And I mean, going into the year, you lose Jason Owe, obviously, to the draft. You lose Shaka Toney. I know Isaac, the other defensive end, who's a young gun, was supposed to be the guy, but he gets hurt in the preseason as well. So you're kind of like, man, like, what do you have? And Ebiketie has become one of the better defensive ends in all of college football. And like I said, he's not the biggest rusher. I think they had him verified at about 6'2", 6'8", and 240 pounds or so. So he's a lightly built stand-up rusher, but he's got almost 35-inch arms. So he has length, he has athleticism. And I think the big difference this year is that you're seeing that like he is putting tools in the toolbox from a pass rush perspective. Like his arsenal is improved a ton. He's got the cross chop, he's got the speed, the power, like he's working different variety of moves. And right now I would say among defensive ends, he's one of the bigger risers in the class. I think that he is a firm day 2 player because you can never have enough pass rushers and enough pass rush productivity. And right now that's what Ebiketie is given not only to Penn State, but I think is from an NFL draft perspective, he's going to give that to a team pretty early.
Mm-hmm. So now who's a guy who's a guy you would compare him to? I know he's an interesting one, and I know there's a bunch of pass rushers. There's a big premium on him now, obviously.
Yeah, I think I would think like stylistically to a Shaq Barrett. Like okay. I think that he is a guy that's more stand-up rusher than true 4-3 defensive end. But I think with how the line of defensive end has gotten defensive end outside linebackers gotten a little blurred over the last couple of years with teams kind of using multiple fronts. Mm-hmm. I think that he's a guy that's going to fit, and he's going to be at least a pass rush specialist early. And although he's a lighter build guy, sort of like Shaq Barrett, Shaq also has good length, and Arnold has good length. And I think that they're going to kind of the shortcomings when we're talking about arm length for some guys, you know, and you're not a great athlete for a guy like Arnold Ebiketie, like, even though I don't think he's a dynamic athlete, he's got length to be able to play on the edge and to impact the game at a high level. So I think a guy like a Shaq Barrett, I mean, if you told me that Arnold a couple years from now is a 10+ sack guy this season, I wouldn't doubt it, because I think that he has that type of upside.
Wow. Hell of a compliment right there.
Yeah.
So moving on a little bit, Brandon Smith, linebacker. I know you said previously you haven't seen much of him this year, but you've done a lot of research in the past on him.
I mean, he's an absolute, I mean, from an athletic perspective, he's exactly what you want in an off-ball linebacker. I mean, last year he was playing more of like that Big Sam overhang role and playing in space a ton, which is bizarre for a guy that's 6'3", 6'4", 230 plus pounds. Going back to high school, he was a 5-star recruit, and everybody knew the name. And obviously he had to wait his turn a little bit behind some guys like Michael Parsons, obviously. And now they have guys like Jesse Luketa, Ellis Brooks, who are both really good players. And I think that for Smith, it's all about getting comfortable playing inside, because at the next level, he's not going to be able to play that overhang spot. He's going to have to play inside and impact the game in the run game. He's a great athlete. I think he's still figuring that stuff out. But I mean, when we're talking about talent level, this is a first-round talents at the linebacker position. I don't think the film is first-round caliber at this moment, but I do think it's getting better, and I think that it's trending in the right direction. Just the biggest question, obviously, is just going to be how comfortable he can get moving forward, because the athlete, there's no questions athletically. Like, he can do some special things on the football field. Yeah,
it sounds like a typical linebacker U-type guy for Penn State, but who would you kind of compare him to, and I guess kind of why?
I think not a great comparison, but I think Baron Browning, who came out of Ohio State last year, he had kind of the similar questions, because Baron Browning had kind of been a guy that had played inside, but like he was playing that Big Sam out in space a ton. And I think Brandon Smith's going to kind of have some of the same concerns. Like, you're going to have to figure out where he best fits. But from an athletic perspective, again, it's special. It's just about finding the right system. Where his landing spot is really going to dictate what type of player, for me, Brandon Smith becomes.
Mm-hmm. So now the last guy I got for you, Jaquan Brisker, he just named a semifinalist for DB of the year in college. What do you think about him?
I think usually when you have a down year like Penn State had, obviously in the abbreviated season in 2020, sometimes you go into the next season a little down on some of the players. And I think one thing that is a recurring theme on this anyway is that I was lower on some guys and now I'm a lot higher. And for Brisker, I am a whole lot higher. I mean, that is, I think, transcendent in this type of football player. He's a guy that in the summer, you would have told me day 3 football player, would have been like, yes, I can get there. Like the traits are good. He's 6'1.5". Like, there's a lot of good things from a split field safety perspective. But I think that this kid is in line outside of Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame to maybe be the second safety off the board. So maybe we're talking a first-round player or early second-round player. I think that's possible, because he has the size, he has the length, been a lot more proactive this year. It seems like he's just always in the right spot compared to being a reactive football player. And then he is a firm tackler in the run game. He brings his pads with him. I think that he has the ability to threaten both from a short zone, deep zone perspective. Haven't seen him in a ton of man-to-man coverage, but like I think the impacts are in the passing game. I think he's physical and I think he has talent. So I think that he's a guy, first round, second round, I think it's very possible.
So now you're also a scout for College Gridiron, the College Gridiron Showcase.
Yes.
Any chance we see a couple Penn State guys this year? I don't know if you could reveal your hand a little bit here or not, but.
Well, I'll tell you, a couple guys will definitely get invites, but the guys that we're talking about today are probably not guys that we're going to get down in College Gridiron Showcase. They're guys that are usually more day 3 into the, priority free agent type of guys. Usually, I mean, I know they had a couple guys last year, I think that may have went in the late 3rd, 4th round type of range. So maybe a couple guys, maybe like a Jesse Lucchetta, who we didn't even talk about, the other linebacker, but they'll definitely get invites. I just don't know if we're necessarily going to be able to get them down to Texas.
Yeah, that was my other question. Is there anyone else? I know you just mentioned Lucchetta, but is there anyone else on this Penn State roster that you kind of catch your eye a little bit or keeping a close eye on?
I think both linebackers are really interesting, to be honest. Ellis Brooks is kind of just super consistent, always in the right spot. Not a ton of physical traits to get excited about, but like I think he's just a firm, solid depth piece on the next level. And Jesse Lucchetta is really interesting because he is 6'2", 6'3", 250 pounds. He looks like that traditional Mike, but I mean, that player just doesn't exist too much anymore. So the question I think a lot of people are going to ask her is he an on-ball guy at the next level? Could he play some on the edge? Because, I think that might be the best case scenario for him. And I mean, otherwise, besides for him, I would say, there's Mustafa, I think, got hurt, defensive tackle, so he's probably not going to be in the conversation. But the other guy is Tariq Castro-Fields, who for me is another guy. I think the traits are good. I think everything's solid. I just haven't, in my opinion, I don't think he's really put it all together yet. I think though, they're firm day 3 type player because I think the traits are going to get him drafted. I'm just trying to figure out what is the ideal situation for him and what is the upside with a guy like Tariq Castro-Fields. So
now, other than draft prep, who's your number 1 sleeper this year? It doesn't have to be a Penn State guy. I'm just more curious on my end. Who's this sleeper that I need to know for fantasy next year?
Sleeper for fantasy. So we need a wide receiver, running back.
I mean, you can give me a sleeper on like a defensive sleeper too, regardless. I'm just curious.
I mean, I guess I'll stick with fantasy, I guess. I'll go tight end for a second. I really like, and he's starting to get a lot more talk and a lot more publicity, so it might not be a super sleeper anymore, but Trey McBride from Colorado State, for me, is a guy that, like, I think he's leading college football in all major categories. We're talking about from the tight end position. So he's not becoming a sleeper. And I know Jim Nagy is really high on him, obviously, at this point, but we're talking 6'4", we're talking 260 pounds. Very athletic football player for his size, but really dog in the run game as well. And I think that he compares a lot to a Brent Selleck that obviously used to play with the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm really excited about him. I think that he's a starting caliber tight end early in his career. And I would not be surprised if when all is said and done, he sneaks late first, but I think firmly second-round player for Trey McBride.
So now, obviously, you do a ton of scouting, whether it's the RiseNDraft.com or various podcasts. Where else can guys find more info on you and more info from more scouting reports, I guess, at this point?
Yeah, I keep it nice and simple. So on Twitter, you can follow RiseNDraft. It's RISE, capital N, draft on Twitter, and you can go to RiseNDraft.com. You can find anything from podcasting to scouting reports to daily content, anything. We also have Map Sports Take, which is a podcast that I do, a weekly podcast with David Turner, who's an NFL scouting vet for 18 years, as well as the Believe in NFL Draft Prospect podcast. So I'm all over the place. Just take a look. Also on IrishBreakdown.com, which I cover the Notre Dame Fighting Irish for Sports Illustrated as well. So Notre Dame, NFL Draft, whatever you need, go take a look.
Hey, awesome. Appreciate everything, Ryan, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely, Richie. I appreciate you, man.
Yep. Talk to you.